Wade and Alex are both principals of McLean Asset Management and retirement researcher. Both are SEC-registered investment advisors located in Tysons, Virginia. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational and educational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific securities. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor. All investing comes with a risk, including risk of loss. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Welcome back to Retire with Style. Wade and Alex are back with part 2 of their tax planning series, covering everything from asset location to the Social Security tax torpedo. They also somehow find time to debate whether Van Halen counts as classic rock. So there's something for everyone.
Hey everyone, welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Wade and I'm here with my trusty co-host Alex. Hi Alex.
Hello.
And we're continuing with our series on the Retirement Planning Guidebook, celebrating the launch of the 3rd edition. That happened at this point back in January, but it's a long series because there's a lot in the Retirement Planning Guidebook. And we're continuing this week with our look at tax planning in Chapter 10 of the Retirement Planning Guidebook. Alex.
Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, Wade, but you did the same mistake I did in the last episode.
Did I?
Yeah.
No, I didn't catch it. I said,
yeah,
I'm
you
Alex.
said, I'm Alex, and I'm here with Alex.
All right.
Can you believe that?
Symmetry.
No. I'm kidding. Wade doesn't make mistakes. He's a one-take kind of guy.
One take Wade.
One take Wade. There we go. That's actually, we kid, but people don't know this, but Wade does all of these things, and when we go back into our studio, he does all of these in one shot. He doesn't mess around.
Yeah, I don't like retakes.
Yes. You can't upset the talent, everyone. You can't upset the talent. He's a little prima donna backstage, right? What do you want? Like four cubes of ice for every 8 ounces of water?
Is that how it works?
You get something like that? You're like Van Halen, only green M&Ms.
Yeah.
Actually, I read a thing on that, or no brown M&Ms, and that was their cue for. It's not that they cared; it was more that if the place that we're playing at went through the trouble of making sure there were no brown M&Ms in their like M&M jar or whatever, then they could rest assured that everything else was taken care of.
Yeah, that somebody actually read the contract, right?
Yeah, something like that, you know. But maybe that's apocryphal. I don't know.
Makes sense.
Are you a Van Halen fan?
Not in particular, but they're
No?
fine. I've
Really?
nothing against them.
I thought you were like a classic rock guy.
Yeah, although today
No,
they'd be
they
considered
kind of were
classic rock.
transitioning. They were more like late
They're more
70s.
80s.
No. They were kind of in between, right?
Yeah, and today the classic rock I think goes up into grunge and everything. But when
Really?
I was a teenager, they were not considered classic rock.
Yeah. No, me neither. That was more like, Zeppelin and Floyd and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Represent.
You're a big Ram Jam guy.
Jimi Hendrix.
All right, here we go. Taxes. Let's knuckle down as we get ready to talk about taxes. All right, so in the last episode, we got into the different types of, we talked about, what are the things you can do above the line, below the line, etc. And then we moved on to the different types of accounts, taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free, and the like. And we didn't give enough treatment to asset location. Like among those accounts, what assets are more efficient? What assets are more efficient in the different types of accounts when you're looking at your portfolio? Because I'll say this. A lot of times when, let's say, a prospect comes over to McLean or whatnot, and we see their statements, and they have, let's say, a 401k, an IRA, and a taxable account, there's not a lot of complementary pieces across those three accounts. Those accounts tend to maybe mirror each other. You know, I've got the same types of holdings in this account, in that account, and in the other account. And the thinking is, well, you know, that's good because I'm consistent. What's your take on that in light of that? I know don't laugh, all right? Actually, it happens, man. It really does. Mm-hmm. What's your take on asset location and how to think about this three-body problem?
Yeah. Yeah, you can do better than just having the same asset allocation in each account. And asset allocation always comes first. That's, you're choosing like, how much stocks should I hold? How much bonds should I hold? That's the first priority. And so if it means not following the asset location principles, you don't. You do asset allocation first and then asset location. But with asset location, we talked about with taxable brokerage accounts, that's really where you want to have your most tax efficient asset classes that are going to be generating the most preferential income, meaning qualified dividends and or long-term capital gains.
Why is that preferential as opposed to other? What is it? Why is it called preferential?
Because it's taxed at lower rates than ordinary income.
Okay.
And when we talk about pitfalls in retirement, we'll talk about how that stacks on top of ordinary income. But that's, instead of having the tax rates running the 10, 12, 22, 24, up to the 37, you just have the 0 and the 15 and then 20 plus a 3.8% surcharge. So you have lower tax rates for that income. And you have a higher threshold. The 15% bracket for that starts in the same ballpark as where the 22% bracket starts on ordinary income. So you're already getting taxed on ordinary income with the 10, 12, and then 22% bracket. But you're riding through a 0% bracket up until around that same ballpark with the where 15% kicks in on your preferential income.
Okay.
So tax efficient asset classes, generating growth with long-term capital gains and the like, best for taxable. For the tax-deferred accounts, everything comes out as ordinary income. So that's really a good place to think about like your bonds. Whatever you want to hold in bonds, the first choice for where to put them would be in your tax-deferred accounts.
I would take it beyond just bonds, and I would even include like dividend-generating holdings. Bonds comes first, but I'm just thinking REITs as well.
Yeah, that's REITs is another good option. It's when we think about, so we've got taxable accounts, and then we have your tax advantage accounts, and that's the tax deferred and tax exempt. So when you're thinking about the tax deferred versus tax exempt, it's really tax inefficient asset classes, but then those with lower returns tend to be more for the tax deferred account. Those with the higher potential returns tend to be better suited for the Roth account. They may generate a lot more growth that would have been otherwise, and maybe it's tax inefficient, so you'd rather have them in the Roth, but you don't have to worry about losing that long-term capital gains treatment in the Roth since it's not taxed anyway.
Okay, and to be clear, you want those high growth ones in the Roth because the RMD thing, you can just let them grow. You can just let them grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about RMDs. Roth accounts tend to be more backloaded in the retirement spending. Like when you're doing tax efficient retirement distributions, on average, you're going to be holding Roth assets longer than you might hold taxable or tax deferred assets. So longer window, more growth opportunities, and just having all that growth be tax free. And going to beneficiaries potentially as well, tax-free.
And potentially, can you make the same argument that the Roth and the HSA should be thought of in the same vein from an investment standpoint, even though the purpose of the HSA is to use it up for health-related expenses?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the HSA, well, if you're thinking to spend it soon, so maybe you're already in retirement and using it for health expenses, you may not want to be as aggressive with it.
That's true.
But yeah, if it's still a long-term holding, you could think about going with more growth-oriented assets. It really just depends on the time horizon you're looking at. Now, and to be clear about the HSA, it's not a good account to leave to beneficiaries because that transforms it into more like an IRA where the beneficiaries have to pay taxes on the account, and they only have a 1-year window to do that.
No, and for me, I'm thinking of it more like, we were talking about long-term care policies in previous episodes, and you said you can get a QLAC and have that cover it. Well, that's where you can kind of like let that HSA accumulate and use it then, for those kind of things. But your point's well taken. Now, somebody that is listening in, I don't know if they caught it or not, could be saying, but wait, you just said in the taxable accounts, put the equity stuff.
Or tax-efficient equities.
Okay, yeah, tax-efficient equity stuff to let it grow, that kind of thing. Aren't you just making that same argument now for the Roth?
Well, these are the less tax-efficient equities. So if you have like emerging market funds or small cap
if you have two growth components, if you have two growth equities, ETF A, that's a growth one, and ETF B, that's a growth one. And,
yeah, like
who knows which one's going to outgrow the other? You're just guessing at that point. Put the one that's the most tax efficient in the taxable and the one that's the least tax efficient in the Roth.
Yeah. So like if you have the S&P 500 or total U.S. market or even total world market index funds, those lean more towards the taxable account. Whereas if you have any actively managed stock funds or you have just less tax efficient, emerging markets might have more foreign taxes and things, that of thing lean more towards the Roth.
So let's say, just so that, and I'm going to use an extreme example because I want you to, somebody thinking in their head, hey, what about this example, right? And it's an extreme one, granted. I have $99,000. I'm going to, because I don't want to do the math. I have 99, you know where I'm going with this. I have $99,000. I'm going to put $33,000 in the S&P ETF index in a taxable account. I'm going to put $33,000 in a mix of half REITs and half aggregate bond index. And I'm going to put $33,000 in small cap ETF since it's, less tax. No, let's use your emerging markets. I'm going to put $33,000 in the emerging market thing. So you have effectively 3 accounts. The taxable is holding the S&P. The tax deferred is holding income yield kind of stuff. And the tax free is holding emerging markets. And that would have been your ideal allocation anyways, 33%, 33%, 33%. It's just you want it, for whatever reason, you want it held. That's your allocation that you want. And those 3 accounts. Is that something that's recommended to that extreme? Or are you like, I don't know about that?
No, if your accounts were each that size, then you've got it all lined up. The reality is usually you're not going to have that match that you'd like. So
no, I agree. I want people to conceptualize this as they're listening.
Yeah, the asset allocation comes first. So if you want that third for asset allocation reasons, that's your strategic asset allocation. That's the priority of what you want to follow. And then just to the extent that you can, you line that up in the available accounts. So you probably don't have the account size. You probably don't have $33,000 in your IRA, $33,000 in your Roth, $33,000 in your taxable account. So you just lean to the direction that you can. If you have $10,000 available in the Roth, well, yeah, you'd put the less tax efficient stocks for that $10,000. The other $23,000, you'd have to decide where it best fits. It just depends. You lean in the direction of these asset location principles to the extent you have the capacity available to do so, but you don't let that guide your asset allocation.
Now, agreed. I just want people to think about this as they're listening. So that's a better option than having 33%, 33%, 33% of those 3 things in a taxable account, 33%, 33%, in a tax deferred, and then the same thing in a tax free. Now I'm going to give my answer why, and then you can fill it in. The reason that's better is, let's take the REIT example. REITs, let's say by law, over 90% of the revenues have to be kicked out in dividends, so they themselves have tax-free status. That goes for private REITs and public. Remember somebody wrote in once? So if you have a public REIT, a publicly traded REIT, and let's say you have a taxable account and you put it in a taxable account, and let's say the return of the REIT is 10% for the year. a lot of that is going to come in the form of dividends or whatever, because they have to kick it out. And I'm just making up numbers now. Whatever your tax rate on dividends is, let's say the return is 10%, but because you're going to get taxed on it, you only realize of that 10%, I don't know, 7 percentage points of it. So you lost 3 percentage points to taxes on the return. Whereas if it was, and so remember, that doesn't compound then the next year and the next year and the next year. Whereas if that was in a tax deferred account, you would receive the full 10% and not pay taxes on it since it's tax deferred. Is that a proper assessment, Wade? Do you want to add to that, take away from that, et cetera?
Yeah, that's the problem with the taxable account is you have to pay taxes each year on interest, dividends, and realized capital gains. And that's if you may not have sold any shares, but if the mutual fund or ETF internally is rolling over, changing its positions, your tax statement may show up with some capital gains, and you have to pay taxes on an ongoing basis. And so if you pay the taxes through the investment account, that money is now gone and doesn't get to enjoy future compounded growth.
And you see that with REITs. But, I don't subscribe to this, and neither does Wade, but a lot of folks are retirement income investors view like dividend-paying stocks as an option for income. We've talked about that ad nauseum, why that's not the most optimal, but that's for another day as well. But if you're going to do that, you're not going to recognize all of those gains. They're not going to manifest in your account because you're going to get taxed on them if you have them in a taxable account as opposed to in a deferred account.
Are you getting close to or are you in retirement? Well, investing during retirement is a little bit different than during your working years. Your investments are there to help you pay for retirement, and now is when they need to earn their keep. To make sure you're on the right track, download Retirement Researcher's 8 tips to becoming a retirement income investor by heading over to retirementresearcher.com/8tips. Again, get your copy of Retirement Researcher's 8 tips to becoming a retirement income investor by going to retirementresearcher.com/8tips. That's the number 8 tips.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then you avoid paying taxes every year and eating into the future growth. You pay the taxes and then that money is out of the account, and so you don't get any growth on that money anymore. That's why tax deferral can really be an improvement over a taxable account. Which is then when we talk about spending in retirement, the conventional advice, which is directionally correct, is you spend your taxable brokerage account assets first, then tax deferred accounts, and then tax exempt accounts. Now we can improve upon that a lot, but that general framework works because taxable brokerage accounts are generating all that ongoing taxation. So getting that out of the way first tends to give you a better outcome.
Now, if someone says, yeah, but why am I getting rid of my higher growth assets first? I want to get rid of those last.
Well, that's where then whatever your asset allocation should be, you have to start making those adjustments. So if you don't have any taxable brokerage accounts, that means your tax efficient stock funds now are held in a retirement tax advantaged account, which would lean more towards the Roth to the extent you have the capacity.
Yeah, and the reality is you can rebalance in a tax deferred and tax free account without any like capital gains or anything like that. It's just executing a trade at that point. And so it's much easier to maintain your stock to bond allocation. You can do two things. If you're constantly taking from taxable, but you want to be more conservative on the allocation, guess what? If your taxable has the highest, expected returning assets, it's most likely going to be equity driven. So you're kind of lowering your equity allocation. But if you're doing it to the degree that you feel it's too much of an extreme and you want to stay still with a healthy equity exposure, you still sell from the taxable, but you trade in the tax deferred or the tax free account because you're not going to get any, you're not going to be taxed on any capital gains or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rebalancing, that's another problem with taxable accounts. Rebalancing is generating taxable income for you, but you can rebalance in tax advantage accounts without generating taxable income.
Okay.
Another way of saying that.
Probably a better way, too.
Not necessarily.
No. All right, wait. What pitfalls do people face from a tax perspective in retirement?
So now we're really getting into really the justification for things like Roth conversions and whatnot. But this gets into the tax maps in the chapter, and that's the concept that Joel Sasser developed. It's how to think about the effective marginal tax rate, where when you pay taxes, you're not just paying like the income tax bracket that you're in. There's all these other aspects of the tax code that can add to your tax bill. And that's what we mean by the pitfalls. We want to talk about things like how generating income can also cause Social Security to be taxable, how it can lead to surcharges on Medicare premiums, how it can push your long-term capital gains into higher tax brackets as well, how it can lead to the loss of Affordable Care Act subsidies, how it can lead to the phase out of below-the-line tax deductions. Are there
Jesus,
some other...
you're a breath of fresh air.
Yeah. But these are all the things that you want to
I will say why
about.
I'm disappointed, Wade. I had it on my bingo card that you would use the term IRMA when you were talking about Medicare, and you failed to do that. I think this is the first time ever you have not said IRMA when you're talking about Medicare. Damn you, Wade. Damn you. I was ready to go bingo, and you messed me up.
But those are the income-related monthly adjustment amounts, and those are surcharges on Medicare premiums when your income exceeds certain thresholds, and it impacts you 2 years later. But
okay, so you have the Social Security tax torpedo. You have potentially the IRMA, which is related to Medicare, and what was the last one before I started joking around? Say it again.
There are a lot more. There's not.
Then fire away.
Social Security, IRMA. The preferential income stacking is the idea that your long-term gains and qualified dividends get pushed into higher tax brackets.
Talk to me about that, because I don't think people recognize that as much as they can.
Okay, so suppose I'm in the 12% ordinary income bracket, like 12% bracket, how we usually think about things. I take $1 out of my IRA, pay tax at 12%, but I also have some long-term capital gains. Those long-term capital gains add on top of my ordinary income and then apply the 0, 15, or 20% brackets. So I could take $1 out of my IRA, and then if that also uniquely causes another $1 of my gains to get pushed from the 0% bracket into the 15% bracket, I'm now actually paying a 27% effective marginal tax rate on that $1 I took out of my IRA. 12% on that $1, plus another 15% on $1 of my long-term capital gains. That's the preferential income stacking problem. And when you're doing Roth conversions and things...
Walk me through the 12. What the initial 12% is for your income rate. What's the initial... And on top of the income, you're paying... Why are you paying that much more? I wanted to be like a 2-year-old kind of thing.
Yeah, so let's say I've got $50,000 of long-term capital gains. If I didn't have any...
Separate from the IRA that you're taking money out of.
Yeah, this is from my taxable.
That's what I wanted to...
So if I didn't have any ordinary income, that would all fit into the 0% long-term gains preferential income bracket. But now I start taking out from the IRA, I have ordinary income. I'm always adding the $50,000 on top of my ordinary income to see how it's taxed. And eventually I'll get to the point where, as I keep taking money out of the IRA, it's going to cause that $50,000 to start to slide. So $1 is going to slide from it no longer fitting in the 0% bracket anymore. It's going to get pushed into the 15% bracket. And that's the preferential income stacking problem. When it's binding, I could be in depending on how much gains I have, I could even be in the 0, still in the standard deduction, or I could be in the 10 or 12% brackets. But if I take another $1 out, so I have another $1 of ordinary income, not only is it getting taxed at that 0, 10, or 12%, but it's also pushing another $1 of those gains to now get above that threshold. So it's taxed at 15% instead of 0%. Also,
so your capital gains go from 0 to 15 because you took income.
So it's causing, I pay 12% on the $1 of ordinary income, plus I pay 15% on $1 of my long-term capital gains because I took that $1 of ordinary income. Yeah. That's the preferential income stacking problem that can lead to that 27% effective marginal tax rate. And that's one of the big spikes to watch out for on the tax map at
No, it's to be clear though, if someone's listening, all right, the dollar of income, fine, that's taxed at what did you say, 12%?
Mm-hmm.
All right, but that's just 12% on that dollar. The capital gains is going to get taxed at 15%. It's not going to get taxed on 15% plus 12%.
Well, it means that I'm paying an effective marginal tax rate of 27% on my dollar, because taking that dollar is causing me to pay another 27 cents of tax.
On that dollar. Oh, yeah. I see what you're saying. I see. Yeah. I see what you mean. Because you got in you wouldn't have been taxed at all otherwise.
Yeah. And the dollar is taxed at 12%, but it's also uniquely causing a dollar in my gains to be taxed at 15 instead of 0 also.
Yeah, so you apply that 15% on the dollar, and there you have the 27.
Mm-hmm.
I got you.
You got it.
No, you got it.
I love seeing that aha moment when somebody...
Well, I'm just playing along like if I understand. I'm just moving to the next topic. To not belabor the point.
But when people are doing Roth conversions, this can be one of the common stopping points. And that's where a lot of the basic planning software out there, even from providers who talk up how they do Roth conversions, they completely ignore stuff like that. They only fill up tax brackets. It's like if you fill up, they say, okay, go ahead and fill up your 12% bracket till you get to the 22% bracket. Well, you could do that, but then you could, all your long-term capital gains, you have this big chunk where you're really paying at a 27% rate when you thought you were paying at a 12% rate. And if you were trying to only pay taxes at a 12% rate, you wouldn't want to fill up your 12% bracket. You'd want to stop well before then.
And do you have something that lets people figure that out?
Well, the book talks about how to think about this with the tax maps. Now, with our Retirement Researcher Academy, we do have the tax map calculator that lets you see this for the current tax year and lets you plug in, this is the tax rate I'm willing to pay, and then how could I consider doing Roth conversions or harvesting capital gains in a manner that would allow me to stay below that threshold of what I'm trying to manage.
Wait, it would be cool if we had something for consumers that they could like see online and run things like this for themselves, right? Wouldn't you think that'd be a good idea?
Yeah, that's what the tax map calculator is.
Come on, man, I'm trying to set you up.
Yeah, the tax map calculator at the Retirement Researcher Academy lets you do that.
Yeah, okay. All right, any other pitfalls that people face from a tax perspective in retirement?
Well, yeah, there's the Social Security, there's the IRMA. If we're going in order, usually Social Security comes up before the preferential income stacking that we just talked about. So the Social Security tax torpedo is how between 0 and 85% of your Social Security benefits are taxed. And it's the same kind of idea where I could take $1 out of my IRA. It could be taxed at 10 or 12%, but it can also uniquely cause another 85 cents of my Social Security, for 50 or 85 cents of my Social Security to be taxed. But for most people, by the time they leave the standard deduction, they're already into the range where 85 cents of another dollar of Social Security would be taxed. So say I'm in the 12% bracket. I take $1 out of my IRA. It's taxed at 12%. But if I'm in the Social Security tax torpedo, it's also causing another 85 cents of my Social Security to be taxed at 12%. So I'm actually having $1.85 taxed at 12%. That's an effective marginal tax rate of 22.2%.
So what do you want to do about this to avoid this?
Well, it's like sometimes you have no control. This is about, do I want to voluntarily generate income?
Yeah, I know.
Do I want to take money out of my IRA, either to cover expenses or a Roth conversion?
I'm thinking like, so people bridge Social Security, that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, usually it's hard to do things like Roth conversions after you've begun Social Security. Not always, but sometimes. But yeah, before Social Security starts, this can be a great opportunity to do things like Roth conversions because you don't have to worry about the Social Security tax torpedo. And that could help set you up so you're not paying tax on a full 85% of your Social Security later on. Even now, if you're higher net worth in terms of multi-million dollars, you're probably going to be paying taxes on 85% of your Social Security no matter what you do. But even someone with a couple $1 million of assets with tax planning, you're not going to pay 0%. Social Security is taxed at 0%. But if you can get it from 85% down to 45%, that can be significant tax savings.
100%. And IRMA, what's the broad brush on the IRMA?
Yes, so IRMA then comes later. It's at higher income levels because it's now this year for singles, modified adjusted gross income at $109,000, for couples $218,000. So we are getting beyond the like middle class type Americans when you have to start worrying about IRMA. But what IRMA does is if my income exceeds certain thresholds, then 2 years later, I have to pay surcharges on my Medicare premiums. And there's 5 different thresholds where it can be another $1,000 to $1,500 per person, depending on which threshold we're talking about, where my Medicare premiums will go up. Like if I had an adjusted gross income of $218,000, I just pay my standard Medicare premiums. If my modified adjusted gross income was $218,001, I would have to pay my standard Medicare premiums plus another couple $1,000, more than $1,000 per person on my Medicare premiums. So it's a huge tax effective marginal tax impact. It's a spike. $1 of income causes these big tax spikes as I have to pay significantly more Medicare premiums because of that.
And to me, this goes into the benefit of really tax planning, right? Like everyone, we're doing these episodes, we're recording them, we're batching them, and we're doing this on 4/15 today, batching a few episodes. And if you get to this day and then recognize, man, I paid a lot in taxes, obviously, sometimes that's a good thing. Congratulations. But a lot of things could be structured properly with just proper tax planning, and these are one of these things that you don't want it to come back and bite you later. It's just simply because you weren't paying attention to it. Yeah. What do you recommend for somebody that right now is like? Did you ever see Raising Arizona? The movie Raising Arizona.
I did in the 80s, and I don't.
There's a scene where he gets his check. And he's looking at it in disbelief, and I don't know, the clerk order says, "Government sure do take a bite," something like that. So many people are probably thinking this over the past week or so. I mean, the people that are, we don't want to make this a "I told you so" episode or aha, you should have thought about this. What could they be doing for next year to begin to think about this appropriately? Obviously, there's the tax mapping, which I guess it sounds like a plug, but the reality is you should do that every year, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because, right, this works for not just Roth conversions, but also tax-efficient strategies can blend. Like I mentioned, the conventional wisdom, you spend taxable and then tax-deferred and then tax-exempt. But the better approach is you blend. So if you're taking out of your IRA, suppose you already spent your taxable account, if you take another dollar out of that, if that's going to trigger some problem, you stop and you cover the rest of your spending through the Roth. Or this is where like things like Roth conversion, not Roth, reverse mortgages, anything, reverse mortgages, proceeds from a loan, non-taxed income sources, things that don't add to your adjusted gross income can also allow you to meet expenses without adding to the adjusted gross income and therefore not triggering tax problems.
Could this be where you have good buffer assets? I know buffer assets, you think about them for emergency reasons, but could this be a good sort of arrow to have in your quiver, in the buffer asset quiver for the, moving stuff around?
Yeah, the buffer assets that we talk about, that temporary spending resources that will help you not have to sell from a portfolio when it's losing value. Those buffer assets are generally tax-exempt tax-exempt spending sources. So they don't add to your adjusted gross income. It's the reverse mortgage, it's proceeds from a loan, so it's not in your adjusted gross income. If you're borrowing from a life insurance policy, it's, again, a loan, so it doesn't go in your adjusted gross income. And if you just have a pile of cash, if you're not triggering any capital gains or anything because you're spending from the cash, it's a way to meet expenses without generating taxable income. So you could also use them as kind of a quote unquote tax buffer at the same time.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening in on this week on Retire with Style. And we'll be signing off, and we'll catch you next week as we continue down this path on taxes, and
taxes.
There we go. All right, everyone. Catch you next week. Bye.
Wade and Alex are both principals of McLean Asset Management and retirement researcher. Both are SEC-registered investment advisors located in Tysons, Virginia. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational and educational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific securities. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor. All investing comes with a risk, including risk of loss. Past performance does not guarantee future results.